When my friends at WeFun asked me to review the Tina2 3D printer, I knew the perfect project to do on it. A 3D printed beaded tie made to resemble Super Mario Bros. 1-1. Oh yeah, I'm pretty excited about this one. Hey everybody, it's Joe, the 3D printing professor. And if you're new to 3D printing or just want something new to do with 3D printing, you're in the right place. I hope you'll stick around, and I hope that you'll come and join me on my Discord, where we have amazing people who are doing great things with 3D printing and helping each other get better, showing off the cool things that they're making, and just generally having a good time. I hope to see you there. Now, I have previously reviewed the WeFun Tina2, and that 3D printer got high praise from me. High praise in the form of when a family member was looking to get into 3D printing and said, "Hey Joe, do you have an extra 3D printer we could have?" I pulled the Tina2 down from the shelf, as well as some other starter 3D printers that I had, and the Tina2 was the one that fired up and started printing without needing a lot of help and configuration and fixing, even though it had sat kind of fallow on my shelf for a while. The sort of 3D printer that you're willing to recommend and even give to friends and family, I can think of no higher praise. And the Tina2S adds to that with, well, honestly, not a whole lot. It does have auto bed leveling, which on such a small 3D printer isn't usually a problem, but it's just one more thing that you just don't have to deal with. And they've improved the Wi-Fi capabilities of this machine so that you can stream prints to it, provided that you're using their WeBuilder slicer. However, this one can also use Cura, which I find much easier to use. So in that, it is an improvement over the Tina2. Mini 3D printers are kind of an interesting proposition. Most people look at them and think, that's too small for what I want to do. But if you look at what people are actually 3D printing most of the time, 80–90% of it would fit on a mini 3D printer, meaning that it's good for usually what you want to do. In fact, when I make printablocks, I usually compile them into plates so that they're easy to print. So you could just print a couple of plates and have all the parts that you need. But these plates are plated for a mini 3D printer. So yes, 100% you can print printablocks on here, you can print toys, you can print actually useful functional prints like some of the ones that were made for this project. Now, the WeFun 3D printer comes with a mini spool of filament, and it has a spool holder built into the side of it. That spool holder is perfect for mini spools of filament, but if you want to print with normal size rolls of filament, you're going to need to get yourself some kind of external filament holder. And fortunately, there are options that you can 3D print, some of which would fit on a mini 3D printer. So if you're clever, you could use that starter spool of filament that they send you to make a filament holder for the bigger spools of filament that you're going to use later. The Tina2S comes with a couple of test prints on the SD card, but when I printed them out, I had some problems. The articulated pterodactyl model that comes on the SD card, I noticed while it was printing that the links weren't attached at all. And in fact, the only reason why some of these are holding on is because, well, there's enough fusion between them. But some of them, in the G code, it doesn't even have a connector on there. It's like they had a model that was too big and they needed to scale it down, but they didn't actually try printing it out. Same thing with the articulated elephant model. I've seen this model online elsewhere, and it's really fun because it prints flat and articulates out. But the nose was so thin that it just snapped, even just pulling it off of the build plate. And again, this is because they scaled it down to make it fit on the 3D printer, but then didn't actually test the 3D print themselves. I don't know. I hope this isn't a portent for what's to come. Of course, I'm going to test it with printablocks, and it prints printablocks just fine. No problem with them. The connectors snap. Everything works really, really well. So no complaints. It's a perfect printablock printer at least. So it was time to get to the beaded tie project. Now I've seen beaded ties like this before, but I basically just wanted to 3D print the beads on here so I could have as many as I want and only as many as I want in whatever colors that I wanted. Now, it started with a lot of planning. I made a grid, and in fact, I took the World 1-1 map and just scaled it so that it was 12 blocks high and however many blocks wide, and realized it was a lot of blocks wide. So I needed to shrink it down. I did some editing on the map to get rid of parts that, while important to the actual layout of the map, might not be missed if you're just glossing over looking at it at a tie. Then I needed to reduce the number of colors to as few as I could possibly get away with, which in the end I decided was 10. 10 colors would be perfect to convey the map data as accurately as I needed it to be. I counted up all the individual pixels on there, made a list of how many that I would need to 3D print, and got to 3D printing. I played with a couple of different iterations on the design of the bead. I at first thought maybe I wanted this to be, squares with holes in them like pixels, like the things that maps are made out of. But I thought that might be too harsh edged. Maybe I want to round the front or the back, except how do I make sure that it keeps the front and the back there and not turning sideways? And in the end, I decided, I would just make a perfectly round bead. And then after doing some measurements, I realized, oh, this would be the proper size for the bead. This would be the proper hole. So I started printing beads. Oh, so many beads. In fact, these blue beads, there were so many of them. And every time I'd pull the build plate off and clean them off, there would always be one or two that escaped and went somewhere else. I am still finding blue beads under feet in places I did not expect to find them. And you can see I actually printed an excess of blue beads. Well, so much for printing only exactly what I want, but part of that came to a mistake that I made in the beading process. Oh yeah, the beading process. I looked up how to make beaded bracelets, and these bracelets have certain patterns that people follow. There's lots of tutorials for them online, but it seems to me like most of the tutorials are just making stuff up as they go. I figured if they could be making stuff up, well, I would probably have to resign myself to figuring this out as I went. So I did. I was going to need a loom big enough for a tie. So I took some scrap wood, cut some notches into the end, added some screws, put it all together, and strung it up with a lot of bead wire. Now, I didn't use proper beading wire for this project. I could have, but the increments that they sell it in is 8 feet, which if you're just making bracelets is enough for a couple of bracelets, but if you're making a tie, not going to cut it. Instead, I used fishing wire, which is about the same size and really works just as well for this project anyways. And then I spent 2 days following the plan and beading up the tie, row by row, being careful to make sure that I'm following the pattern as closely as possible. And this is where I made my mistake that led to so many excess blue beads, because when you make a beaded bracelet, you need to add 1 extra row of wire so that your beads can go around the end and come back. I thought that I was doing that, but no, I made it just 1 short of what I needed. So the entire top row of blue beads, which really isn't important to the map and is just sky the whole way across, well, I had to get rid of those, so I ended up extra blue beads. But with the tie all beaded up, I wasn't done. I needed a way to put it around my neck, and so I used a piece of elastic, and I wanted to make a clasp. Those little plastic clasps that you snap together. This one I also printed on the Weedo Tina2, but obviously it's not the one that I used because what I wanted for this was a much smaller one. Fortunately, I found this amazing 3D printed clasp by Henry Arnold that he made for survival bracelets. Look at this thing. It is designed for 3D printing. Look at those gentle slants and overhangs. Oh, this thing is, I love it. And with that in place, my beaded Super Mario Bros. 1-1 tie is all together and ready to wear. Now, there were some things about this that if I were going to make a version 2, I would dive into. For instance, I wanted to put a pinch in the top to make it a little bit more tie-like, but unfortunately it doesn't have enough give. The flat ends of the beads aren't letting it bend this direction very much, so I had to forego the pinch in here, which isn't a big deal. It works just fine as is. And the Weedo Tina2S did an amazing job in printing all of these beads for this project. Now, every rose has its thorn, and the Weedo Tina2S has one that I need to talk about briefly. They advertise this as having an app that you can start prints from and that it's super easy to use. And yes, they do. But that app was the impetus for making the video where I talk about how not to make an app for your 3D printer. Like the test prints that they never really checked out, their app, not only does it rip 3D print files from Thingiverse and other places without giving attribution, and that's a no-no, but it also, yeah, it has prints on it that they haven't tested, that require supports that don't have supports. They just threw models on there and didn't even try it. So their app, I would say, skip it. It's not worth it. Though if Weedo ever does put the time and effort into making that app actually useful and even more a hub for the community to come and join and work with and help them make better, this could be a Toy Box killer app. Not that I want Toy Box to go away. Still love that 3D printer, still using it like every single day. But for the price, if you're just looking for a mini 3D printer, yes, it's the right price, the right size, and it works in that regard as is. So the Tina2, actually, I'm pretty pleased with it in the end. Well, that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. And remember, you are a child of God, so you're special to me. So take care of yourself and, if you can, someone else too. Thanks for watching. Love this thing.